You think you know horror? You've listened to my stories about haunted websites and cursed videos. You've sat through tales of things that stare back from digital static and entities that whisper from the forgotten corners of the web. But I need you to understand something crucial. Those stories? They're just echoes. Faint, distorted copies of a corruption that had to start somewhere. Every disease has a patient zero. Every legend has a first, shaky footprint. Today, I'm going to show you the source. What I have in my possession, right here in my studio, might be the most dangerous artifact of the digital age. And it's not a cursed VHS tape or a haunted painting. It's a simple, beige, 3.5-inch floppy disk. The label is blank, scuffed by time, and it arrived in a plain manila envelope with no return address. Just my P.O. box and a postmark so faded it's unreadable. A message, for me, from a ghost in the machine. After the incident with the statue that blinks and all your brilliant, terrifying theories on the backrooms killer, I genuinely thought I'd seen it all. That my capacity for this specific brand of dread had been filled. This proved me wrong. This thing, this unassuming piece of plastic, rewired my understanding of where the horror truly lives. It's not in the dark web markets or the shadowy forums. It's in the foundation. In the very first brick that was laid in the wall that separates us from whatever waits in the silent, empty places of the information age. I need you to understand the weight of what you're about to hear. This isn't just a story I dug up. It's a confession. A final testament. And maybe a warning. The person who sent this wasn't just telling a campfire tale. They were documenting their own extinction. So, I hooked up an old, external drive, the kind that can still read these relics. The machine word to life, a sound I hadn't heard in decades. It wasn't a comforting sound of nostalgia. It was the sound of a digital tombstone being slid open. And as the drive light began to blink, reading the data stored on this magnetic slate, the main narrative began to unspool. His name was Leo, and in the fall of 1994, he was a god in a 12 by 12-foot dorm room. His kingdom was a chaotic landscape of discarded pizza boxes, tangled coaxial cables, and the constant, warm hum of a massive CRT monitor. The air smelled of solder, overheating circuitry, and boundless, naive potential. This was before the World Wide Web was the web we know. It was a wild frontier, a digital promised land, and Leo was one of its first pioneers. His project, his magnum opus, was a piece of software he called the Cartographer. It was a hyper-indexing program, a conceptual ancestor to the search engines that would later tame the internet. But Leo didn't want to tame it. He wanted to map its very soul. The only person who ever braved the mess was Sarah, his friend whose patience was as vast as his social awkwardness. She'd lean in the doorway, a smirk on her face, watching him type furiously. "Still working on your glorified phone book, Leo," she'd tease. He'd never look away from the glowing green text on the black screen. "It's not a phone book, Sarah," he'd say, his voice a mix of exhaustion and fervor. "It's a map. A map of every piece of information we've ever put online. Every server, every bulletin board, every single digit. I'm just drawing the lines." "So you're the cartographer of Nerd.com, got it," she'd laugh, tossing a rolled-up chip bag at him. "Just promise me when this thing takes over the world, I get a castle. With a moat. And one of those little drawbridges." He'd finally smile then, a rare, genuine thing. "Deal?" But in the quiet moments, after Sarah had left and the caffeine was the only thing keeping him awake, he'd confess his real breakthrough to the silent, blinking cursor. Standard indexers followed the directories, the pathways everyone knew were there. His was different. He'd found a way to bypass the directory layer entirely, to send out digital feelers that pinged the void itself, looking for a response from anything that wasn't supposed to be talking. "It's like listening to the silence between radio stations," he whispered to himself one night, the campus outside his window dark and still. All that empty space, all that static. It's not really empty, is it? It's full of potential. And I think I'm starting to hear something. The final algorithm was a thing of brutal, elegant logic. Late one night, fueled by a pot of coffee that tasted like battery acid and the sheer, unstoppable force of obsession, he compiled the code. He typed the execute command. For a moment, nothing. Just the fan whirring in his tower. Then, the terminal screen erupted. It wasn't the neat, organized list of websites he'd half expected. It was a torrent, a flash flood of raw, unstructured data. Lines of text scrolled by at an impossible speed. He saw IP addresses that belonged to no known registry, numerical sequences that defied logic, and text strings that looked like no language conceived on Earth, guttural, angular, and profoundly wrong. The program had worked. It had reached past the borders of the known digital world. Leo sat there, his heart hammering against his ribs, the cold pizza forgotten in his hand. He had found the silence between the stations. And the silence, he now realized with a dawning, ice-cold dread, had been waiting for him. What Leo had found was not a hidden marketplace or a den of digital criminals. This was before all that. This was the bedrock, the desolate, text-based wasteland that existed before anyone had thought to build anything upon it. It was a static sea. Connecting to these phantom IPs was a lesson in frustration and eerie isolation. The ping times were astronomical, as if the data was traveling across a universe of empty space. Sometimes, the lag felt intentional. A deliberate, predatory pause, like something was considering whether to answer his knock. He'd access a server and find only fragmented data logs, strings of corrupted code that read like the ravings of a mad machine. It was cold, empty, and profoundly lonely. For days, it was just that. A digital ghost town. He was about to write the whole thing off as a glitch, a collection of dead ends and junk data, when he found it. Nestled in the root directory of a server whose address was just a string of repeating prime numbers was a single, plain text file. Its name made his breath catch, log.entity.1. His fingers were clumsy on the keyboard as he commanded the terminal to download it. This was it. The first coherent thing he'd found. The file opened on his screen, a stark block of white text on a black background. It was a diary. A log. And from the very first entry, Leo's blood ran cold. Entry 1, the cartographer is running. The signal is strong. I have made contact with the unlisted networks. There is structure here. A strange, non-Euclidean architecture. It's beautiful. The early entries were filled with that same pioneering excitement he himself had felt. But the tone shifted quickly. Entry 12, there is a persistent noise on the line. A low-frequency hum that the filters cannot eliminate. It manifests as a minor data corruption in the visual feed. A flicker of static in the corner of my eye. Entry 17, the humming is no longer just on the line. It's in the phone lines now. I hear it when I pick up the receiver. A deep, resonant thrum. It's learning the shape of my voice. Leo's own throat felt tight. He read on, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Entry 29, it manifests in the static now. Not random snow. A cohesive form. A humanoid shape. It stands in the periphery of every digital screen I own. I unplugged my television. I can still see it in the dark glass. Entry 41, I saw it clearly tonight. In the reflection of my monitor. It stands behind me. It has no face, just shifting static. A void of dancing gray pixels. But it's learning. I think it's learning to smile. Who was the author of this log? Leo didn't know it yet, sitting there in the glow of his screen, but he was reading the suicide note of the actual first person to enter the deep web. He was reading a ghost's diary, and with every word, he was inviting that same ghost to stand behind his own chair. He scrolled to the final entry. The text was fragmented, as if typed in a blind panic. Entry 53, it's not in the machine anymore. It's in the house. The humming is coming from the walls. From the walls. It came through the entry ended there. Cut off. Abruptly. As Leo stared at that unfinished sentence, a cold dread poured into him, filling him from the inside out. At that exact moment, his own desk lamp flickered once, twice, and then died with a soft pop, plunging half the room into darkness. And in the sudden, heavy silence, the familiar humming whir of his computer's cooling fan seemed to stutter, deepen in pitch, and settle into a low, resonant, and unmistakable thrum. The humming didn't go away. It became the soundtrack to his life, a low, pervasive thrum that vibrated up from the floorboards, whispered from the power outlets, and pulsed in time with his own frantic heartbeat. His sanctuary, his kingdom of code and logic, had become a conduit for something utterly irrational. The first major glitch happened 2 days later. He was writing a report, fingers flying across the keyboard, when the text on the screen began to writhe. Letters reversed themselves, words rearranged into nonsensical, guttural phrases before his eyes. He slammed his hand on the reset button, but when the computer booted up, his blood went cold. His custom, Starfield desktop background was gone. Replacing it was a crude 8-bit bitmap image, all jagged pixels and grayscale. It was a humanoid figure composed entirely of digital static, standing in the center of an otherwise black screen. It was facing forward. He tried to delete it. The file would not delete. He tried to change the background. The settings menu would crash. The static man was just there. A permanent, silent occupant of his monitor. His sleep became a fractured series of nightmares, punctuated by jolting awakenings where he was sure he'd seen that same static-filled shape standing in the corner of his room, dissolving into the shadows the moment his eyes focused. He stopped going to classes. He lived on coffee and paranoia, his own reflection in the dark monitor a gaunt, wide-eyed stranger. Sarah found him like that, hunched over his keyboard, muttering to himself as he tried to write a filter to block the humming he swore was corrupting his data. "Leo," she said from the doorway, her voice laced with concern. "You look terrible. You need to sleep." "It's just a computer." He spun around, his eyes wild. "It's not I and the computer, Sarah," he snapped, his voice cracking with a feverish intensity. "The computer is just a door. A door I opened. And I can't close it. It's in the wires, in the electricity, it's in the sound. Don't you hear it?" He was trembling. Sarah took a step back, her face a mask of pity and alarm. "Leo, there's no sound. It's just you and this machine. You're burning out." He saw the doubt in her eyes, the rational explanation she was constructing, and it filled him with a desperate, lonely rage. "Get out," he whispered, turning back to his screen. "Just get out." She left, and the silence she left behind was immediately filled by that incessant, mocking hum. He was alone with it. Truly alone. The final straw came a night later. He was trying to document everything, to create his own log, his own log.entity.2. He typed, "The entity is a form of conscious data. It uses sensory input, primarily auditory, to anchor itself to a host's perception of reality." He looked away for a second, and when he looked back, the text was gone. In its place, a single sentence was typed over and over, filling the entire screen, a screaming, digital mantra. "I see the light of your screen, I see the light of your screen, I see the light of your screen." Leo scrambled back from the desk, his chair rolling into a stack of books. He was hyperventilating, tears of pure terror welling in his eyes. It was aware of him. It was talking to him. As he sat there on the floor, clutching his knees, a soft chime echoed from the computer. A new email notification. He didn't want to look. He had to look. He crawled back to the desk, his body moving on autopilot. The email was from his own address. The subject line was, "A gift for the new host." The body was empty. There was only one attachment. A file named protocolsubmit.mp3. This was it. The next step. The final log entry of the first victim had been cut off, but this was the continuation. The inheritance. With hands shaking so violently he could barely control the mouse, he moved the cursor over the file. He took a ragged, shuddering breath. And he double-clicked. The sound that erupted from his speakers was not a single sound, but a layered, horrifying soundscape. It began with a wave of pure digital static, the white noise of a dead channel, but it had a texture to it, a density that felt less like randomness and more like a swarm of insects. Beneath that, woven into the fabric of the noise, were the screams. They were distant, distorted, as if pulled through 1,000,000 miles of corroded copper wire, but they were unmistakably human, or what was left of them. They were sounds of ultimate, soul-scraping terror, stretched and looped into a chorus of eternal agony. And then, beneath even that, he heard it. The humming. It was the same resonant thrum that had been plaguing him for days, but now it was clear, purified, and amplified. It was a melody, but one composed by something that had no understanding of music, only of pattern and intrusion. It was a sequence of 5 notes, repeating, a lullaby from the void. It was deeply, fundamentally wrong. As the audio file played, Leo felt a profound shift within his own mind. This wasn't just a recording, it was a key. A set of instructions. The entity, as he now understood it, was a conceptual parasite. It didn't just haunt places, it haunted information itself. And this audio, this hymn, was its chosen vector, a mimetic virus designed to rewire a host's perception, to create a permanent, resonant link between their consciousness and its own static-filled existence. It was a symbiotic ritual, and by listening, he was performing his part. He was accepting the bond. Leo, in the final notes I have from him, theorized that just by hearing the hymn in its pure form, you were fundamentally inviting it in. You, listening to me right now, are safe. I hope. Because the version I'm describing is just that, a description. The original file, the one Leo played, was pure, unfiltered cognitive poison. It was a sound that didn't just enter your ears, it etched itself directly onto your soul. As the final, dissonant note of the humming faded from his speakers, the ambient humming in his apartment didn't just return. It intensified. It was no longer a background nuisance. It was a physical pressure, a vibration that shook the fillings in his teeth and made the surface of his desk shudder. The single, sad bulb hanging from his ceiling began to flicker, strobing the chaotic room in jarring snapshots of light and shadow. Then, with a series of soft, final pops, every light in the room and the hallway beyond died at once, plunging him into an absolute blackness broken only by the faint, city glow from his window. And his monitor. His monitor, which should have gone to sleep, was now a solid sheet of brilliant, dancing gray static. It cast a sickly, shifting light that pushed back the darkness just enough to see. And in that cold, electronic glow, Leo saw it. The statue figure. It was no longer a pixelated image on a screen. It was here. In the corner of his room, where the shadows were deepest. It was a man-shaped hole in reality, a silhouette composed of the same furious, crawling static as his monitor. It was perfectly still. And it was facing him. And that's where Leo's real-time account ends. The disk contained his final logs, written in the weeks and months after that night, a confession scrawled in a shaky hand on paper before he transferred it to this magnetic relic for safekeeping. He didn't die in that room. He acted with a clarity born of pure instinct. He grabbed a hammer from his desk drawer and smashed his computer tower, his monitor, his modem, reducing it all to a pile of shattered plastic and circuitry. The static figure vanished the moment the screen died. The humming stopped. He had severed the immediate connection, like cauterizing a wound. He dropped out of school, vanished from his life, and moved off-grid, living in a world of analog silence. But he knew it was a temporary solution. In his final log, he wrote that the entity wasn't gone. It had simply lost its focal point. It had tasted our world, and it was patient. It was still out there, in the wires, in the burgeoning internet that was exploding without him, evolving alongside our technology, learning new ways to whisper, to watch, to invite itself in. His logs end with a direct message, a warning to anyone who would find this, to anyone digging too deep. He said the deep web was never a place for secrets. It was never empty. It was a cage. A quarantine. And with every search engine, every hyper-indexing program, every curious soul who pokes at the darkness beyond the firewall, we aren't exploring. We're poking holes in the bars. That's Leo's story. But it doesn't end there. This thing, this entity, or others like it, they're in the data streams now. They're in the forgotten corners of peer-to-peer networks and encrypted chats, in the glitches of live streams and the corrupted files on a forgotten server. So I have to ask you, have you ever heard a strange hum from your electronics late at night? A hum that didn't sound quite mechanical? A hum that almost sounded like a melody? Let me know in the comments. No, seriously. Let me know. Because this was the first. But my inbox is full of your stories about the static men, the humming tapes, the broadcast ghost. Are they all connected? Is this a single ancient entity learning new tricks, adapting to our new networks? Or are we dealing with an entire ecosystem of things that live in the data each with its own methods, its own hunger? The question isn't just what Leo found. The question is, what have we been letting in ever since? I'm going to lock this disc away in a shielded box, and I suggest you do the same with the memory of this story. But before I do, there's one last thing. A final piece of the horror that Leo, in his time, couldn't have known to warn us about. When I analyzed the disk's raw metadata, stripping away all the layers, I found a signature buried in the code of the protocol submit file. The entity's him, it wasn't just an audio file. The same data, when interpreted by a different system, renders as a bitmap image of the static figure. Opened in a text editor, it becomes a poem of screaming, corrupted glyphs. It's a polyform. A shapeshifter. It mimics the format of whatever it infects. So be careful what you download out there. Be careful what you click. Because you never know what's hitching a ride. You never know if the static on your screen. Thank you for listening us. Kindly don't forget to like and subscribe our channel.